Hey guys, Toby Mathis back again. I'm one of the partners at Anderson Business Advisors, an attorney who specializes in tax and asset protection. And we're talking about your investments in this section. In the first section, we talked about your practice. And these three videos are specifically for doctors. So we talked about your practice. And in this one, we're going to be talking about your investments. In the third section, we're going to be talking about your life. But for right now, we're going to zero in on your investments. Now, whenever we're laying out investments, I like to look at everything in a quadrant. So if you can imagine a quadrant sitting here in front of me, you have your life up here, right underneath it. And on this side, by the way, my right side, your left, right? It's going to be your life, and underneath it's going to be your active businesses. This whole side is active. On this side is passive. You know, I like to use the old Warren Buffett quote that if you don't learn how to make money while you sleep, you're going to work till you die. This is where you have your passive assets that are kicking money over. And they really fall into two categories. Category one, we put up on top, is called non-risk assets. That's assets that do not create fires. They do not create fires of their own. That's stocks, bonds, private placements, little investments you have that just owning them don't subject you to risk. Like if I own shares in Microsoft, and Microsoft does something horrible, I don't have to pay the judgment of Microsoft. It's separate from me. And all my risk is my investment. So it's sitting up here. I also call this fire starter. It's kindling. It's not fire, but man, is it flammable. If people know that you have stuff up here, that's where they like to try to go to, because that's a very attractive target. Cash and stocks, they're easy to turn into cash. Below that are the risk assets. We have non-risk assets and we have risk assets right here. These risk assets are your rental real estate, your multifamily, or your commercial. If you are investing in real estate, which I think is a great idea, I myself and my partner, we have well over 150 properties. We have everything from commercial, single family buildings, you name it. You want to put it inside of boxes. And when I say boxes, you're going to want to use limited partnerships or limited liability companies, some sort of box to put that in so that it is isolated, because we know it's flammable. So the easiest way to look at this is if this is kindling and this is fire, by all means, put a box around the fire, but also put a box around the kindling and hide it so nobody can come get it, because this is where they want to go. I actually call this a virtual safe. And so if we want to use the analogy, and I sometimes do, if you have cash and you have something that could light on fire, don't put it next to each other, right? Put this in a safe, in a fireproof safe. Something that they can't get, which means we don't want them to know it's there. We don't want them to be able to open it, and it needs to be able to withstand a huge fire so that somebody never gets in and takes our cash away. So we have our personal life. This is your kids. This is your personal house. And by the way, if you have a living trust, that is not an asset protection vehicle. You have homestead exclusions, but we have to address this stuff, especially if you're living in a state with a really small homestead exclusion like California. They could still take your house. You have less than $100,000 of protection. Most of you guys are going to have much more expensive houses, especially in California. It's like $1 million gets you a shack. You're going to have to make sure that you're protecting those assets. Then you have your active business, you have your non-risk asset, and you have your risk asset. Your business practice, we're going to isolate in a box. If your spouse or you have a second business, so let's say you have a consulting business on the side, marketing, or your spouse is a real estate agent or whatever, isolate that in its own box. Do not put real estate business with medical practice. You can't do that anyway. But don't mix them up. You put boxes around each business so it's isolated. Those are firewalls. If all Hades breaks loose and something inside there, if all heck breaks loose, they're not going to be able to get through it and get, God forbid, up to our kindling or up to our personal assets or over here to our other risk assets. We want to make sure that we're isolating them. If you know that you have risky assets, you want to isolate those from each other as well. I don't want two properties that have a lot of value in them in the same box, because if something happens to one, they're taking the second one as well. We don't want them to take them both. And we definitely don't want them coming up into this quadrant of where we have our cash and our stocks and our bonds and our private investments. We do not want this to hop here. We do not want this to hop up here. We don't want our personal stuff to come over. And before you think, oh, there's really not much that could happen in my personal name, let me give you a few of my favorites. I work very closely with a lot of investors, and some of those investors own insurance companies. And they love to tell their stories of these huge claims that come out of stuff that nobody saw coming. So I said to one of my friends, I said, do you have any examples that you could give me that I could share with doctors? And she actually gave me some really good advice. First off, if you are ever in a car accident, do not say you're a doctor. Do not say, by the way, I'm a doctor, because that is just putting a big bullseye. You're probably driving a pretty nice car. Again, if you got hit by a 1969 beater that was barely held together with so much rust and Bondo, you're probably not looking at that person saying, man, I'd like to take that. You get hit by a G-Wagon that's all pimped out and all crazy. You're looking at it saying, that's probably somebody who's got a little bit of money, or better yet, even a Mercedes, the S560 hits you. You're like, that's probably, I'm glad I got hit by them, right? No, you do not want to volunteer that, but I say that in jest. What she looks at is she said, yeah, here's some great examples. Number one, babysitters. Invariably, I had a daughter that went and babysat at the neighbors. I never thought twice about this. Of course, my assets over here are pretty well isolated, and my practice is isolated. But your family, you can never, this is always going to be a fire starter. You drive, your kids do stuff, you do stuff, you talk to people, you interact with people. There's always liability up here that we can never get away from. And this was one that really shook me up a little bit. And what it was somebody hired out somebody's daughter, doctor's daughter, to go be a babysitter. They went over there and they had one of those little jumpy seats where the little baby, it was a 3-year-old baby, was in the jumpy seat. Baby was jumping. Boom, falls over. Nails head on tile. Traumatic head injury to the child. Who do they sue? Well, the babysitter was a teenage girl. Who did they sue? They sued mom and dad for millions of dollars. That should be like, oh my God. Never thought about that, right? I never thought about that. And I sit here and I do this stuff all day long. And I said, well, babysitting, yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, there's somebody who's responsible. The other one was they had a party at the house, no drinking or anything. But one of the kids said, hey, I'll run and grab pizzas at the grocery store. Throws the keys. Hey, do you have a car? Yep, here, take my car. Goes to the grocery store, causes an accident along the way. Serious injuries. In other words, it was a teenager driving too fast. Boom. Multi-million-dollar case. Who are they suing? You got it. The people where the party was being held. Third one. This one kind of was like, this is kind of like why this is a no-brainer one. But this was a beach party, and the doctor's son went to the beach party and saw there was propane tanks that they were using to do grilling. One of the tanks was empty. So he tossed it. Where'd he toss it? Right into the bonfire. Thing exploded. Over $20 million of damage. Just like that. Who's responsible? Doctor is. Of course, everybody's getting sued. They probably sued the propane tank manufacturer. But in these days, there's lots of damage and there's lots of money. They're looking for the deep pockets. And so no matter what you do up here, it's almost impossible to get away from the liability up here. So what we do is we create isolation around our practices. We create isolation around our risk assets, and we create isolation around our non-risk assets. That's called outside liability. I don't want someone to be able to take away what is mine. And if you hold it in the right type of vehicle, like not all LLC statutes are created the same. I use Wyoming and Nevada for a reason up here because nobody can ever take it away from you. Sometimes I use asset protection trusts over here that end up holding these other assets to make sure it's separate from me. I got to make sure that they can't jump those walls. Those are firewalls. And again, no different than a fire on a ship. I got to make sure that I can wall it off and say, that's what I'm willing to lose. If I have a fire in one of my homes and I haven't good insurance on it, there's going to be enough insurance there to cover damages. But if they're not happy and they're looking for more, they're looking for fuel for their fire, I need to be able to wall it off. I need to be able to starve it of oxygen. In other words, most lawyers don't work for free. And these guys are quite often are on contingencies. So you need to wall it off to where they know that's the most I'm going to get. It's not worth it to try to jump anywhere else. I will use up all my fuel, all the money, trying to get to something I will never get to. And that will allow you to settle these things much sooner. Now, I don't want to be bleak, but it's just life. Now, the last thing is when you are doing these investments and when you're using these quadrants, there are some major tax benefits that come along with putting these types of structures together. A lot of you probably didn't realize it. So for example, if I have a risk asset like a office building and I have my practice and I'm renting my own office building to my practice, that can be grouped as one activity. Even if they're in separate boxes, I can treat it as one activity and I can take a massive deduction on that building called bonus depreciation, probably about 20 to 30% of the value of that building, and write it off against my practice income. I also have things like accountable plans and other tax benefits that come out of this. I get huge depreciation benefits when I'm dealing with risk assets. That's why people love them, even though they cause fire, right? Even though they're a hot asset and they're flammable, they're so attractive because there's so many benefits. You just need to be able to control that fire to make sure, hey, I'm not going to expose everything else. And then up here, obviously, if you have good investments, quite often those investments can be tax beneficial. For example, if I did nothing but buy stocks in the stock market, that's all I did. And I wasn't selling them, but I was just getting the dividend. A, that dividend is treated as long-term capital gains. And B, those stocks are not taxed until I sell them. So you have a ton of deferred income that's rolling around out there that's going to be beneficial. It's not going to be taxed at your rate. And so these things really lend themselves well to tax planning. I love doing the tax planning. But for right now, we're just wanted to focus in on the investments and how we can wall them off. And we're going to marry it all together in the next section where we talk about your life and how you bring all these things together and how your plan can be built to benefit you and not just your kids, but future generations.